Welcome everyone. Thanks to all participants from Hong Kong, the ASEAN region, and other parts of the world, and to our partners, the ASEAN Youth Organization and the Southeast Asia Women Organization. We have more than 130 people who have registered for this event. If you wish, you can mention in the chat box which country you're from. So I'm Ravindra, the founder of the ASEAN Network. The ASEAN Network, it's a digital community of thought, business, and young leaders dedicated to connect like-minded individuals who can inspire the younger generation through speaker series, webinar, and virtual conference with topics related to the fourth industrial revolution, such as AI, fintech, education 4.0, smart cities, robotics, and cyber security. You can follow our LinkedIn page for future events and subscribe to our YouTube channel to see our past events. We have 3 different formats of events: Leaders by Head and Heart series, which are one-to-one conversation, some expert series, and Tech for Good webinar, such as tonight. For our second webinar, we have an amazing panel of speakers. They will share their perspective in their countries related to the artificial intelligence and tech for good with some case studies. After, we have also a Q&A session, and at the end, 3 rounds of 3 minutes with a one-to-one networking session generated with an algorithm. So it's good to see on the poll that most of the participants are beginners, and I'm really happy because with our expert tonight, they will provide you the knowledge needed. Thanks for your voting to the poll. So our first speaker today, it's Dr. Renard Hsu, advisor to Send GPS, a political science and social behavioral research firm, where he is responsible for advancing the organization work in the field of climate change and sustainability. He is also the co-founder of the AI Future Lab, a community of next-gen leaders, builders, and thinkers from the field on artificial intelligence. In 2020, he was appointed as SDG Champion Climate Action by the World Economic Forum. Dr. Renard, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Ravi, for the very kind introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all that has joined us today. So as Ravi has mentioned, I'm essentially a climate scientist. And, in recent years, I've basically explored the intersection between AI and how AI could actually help resolve, the climate crisis, which is really, in my view at least, the defining issue of our generation. So just very quickly, I just wanted to set the context of the problem that we're facing. If you look at globally on a scale in terms of temperature rise in the 1950s to 1980s, it tends to take on more of a normalized bell curve, right? But over the years, what we have been observing, or at least data from NASA has shown us, is basically a shift towards higher mean temperatures. So much so that this phenomenon known as global warming, right, has really, really stood out. Like it's been covered by a lot of news media. So extreme temperature events, floods, droughts, the wildfires that we have heard in Australia have basically taken center stage. In the past, such events only covered about 0.1% of our Earth's surface, but that number or statistic has basically increased to about 14.5%, which in other words means that it's actually 14 times more likely for us to be experiencing such catastrophic events. In fact, 19 of the 20 hottest years on records have occurred, right, since 2001. And the hottest of them all has literally occurred in the last 5 years. This is certainly a record that, we shouldn't be proud of. I've mentioned the Australian heat wave. You can see that it's becoming more and more severe. We are experiencing more extreme heat waves. And in other parts of the country, like you're seeing tropical storms and cyclones basically affecting people's livelihoods. This took place, last year in Catbalogong City in the Philippines, where more than 578,000 people were affected as a result of the typhoon Wangfong. And, like the list of catastrophes, like I can continue listing them on and on. This is a photo of a Bangladeshi farmer who has actually experienced a double whammy effect. So not are they suffering from severe droughts, which affect their crop yields, but they also have to deal with floods, right, at this present moment. So agriculture is becoming increasingly affected as a result of climate change. Statistically, we know that floods, extreme rainfall events now occur 4 times more often in the 1980s. This was also a statistic that was taken last year. The monsoon that fell, like in Bihar in India, was 50 times higher than normal. And, in certain parts of India as well, like they are also experiencing severe droughts. So their reservoirs drying up. And people are saying that, the wars of the future would basically happen as a result of water security issues. There is a very strong correlation between hotter years and wildfires that have been happening. This data is specifically for the US, but we have definitely seen this happening in Australia as well. So in summary, our global systems are vulnerable to the climate crisis. Not only does it affect our food supply, affects water security, but also increasingly it's a global health threat, right? So, not just through floods, right, with diseases like cholera, but also like the Zika virus has actually been very closely linked, right, to the increase in temperatures, where mosquitoes like the Aedes aegypti in particular is able to incubate the Zika virus and become a vector of diseases. We see the link very clearly between food and climate, floods, droughts, heat stress, forest fires that are happening, and water security. So, the effects of heat and drought is particularly prominent in Asia, like where I'm from, like in Malaysia. We can see that water stress are prolonged. It causes heat stress, like to animals, crops, human beings. It also damages the flowering of fruits and grains. So in other words, it basically leads to a huge decline in actually crop yields. And this figure basically shows us the projected yield declines for each 1 degree Celsius of warming in the world. You can see that 4 crops, which makes up about 2/3 of human calorific intake, are on a huge decline. So in a world like with an increasing temperature, and we're actually projected to hit about 4 degrees Celsius increase rate, the numbers here is nothing to be proud of. Like we are estimating that there would be about 7 million deaths from air pollution, more than 250,000 deaths from diseases. Hunger and famine will increase, vector-borne diseases, water security issues, among many others. So this really begs the question, right, of what can AI or machine learning do, right? So one key area is obviously with predictability of weather patterns. So I've sort of shown you, in very quick flashes, the impacts of global warming, the correlations that we have found, right, between wildfires and hot temperatures. So we are able to actually predict the occurrence of extreme weather events like floods, droughts, wildfires more accurately with AI and machine learning. AI has also been used, in Malaysia, right, to detect trees and forest health. So as you know, trees are basically they basically sequester carbon. So a lot of landscape architects, those who are working especially in the built environment, know how important trees are to the health of our ecosystem. So we are able to track each and every single tree and also determine their health, right? Like whether they're healthy or not. IBM has also launched something that they call a Green Horizons application, which is really a form of cognitive Internet of Things, or IoT. This basically allows the development of better, more efficient buildings, as they're able to come up with more accurate predictions of energy usage and also predictions of indoor air quality, which is very highly correlated to workers or employees' general health. We have also seen drone-based technologies that are being deployed here in Asia, especially with greenhouse management or greenhouse gas estimations. So AI in general is really transforming the way, right, that we are measuring and capturing carbon dioxide or carbon emissions in the air. Once again, just to reiterate, we have also seen huge applications of artificial intelligence in cities, buildings, and even for individuals. So, if you were to log into this website, www.tmgrow.com, you can see that, there is this application called Chatbot, which basically allows you as an individual, right, to calculate your own personal carbon footprint. If you were to opt for things like carpooling, if you opt for vegan diets, for example, in your meals, you can actually calculate how much CO2 has been reduced as a result of that, which is really interesting if you really think about it. And AI is really helping to change and shift that sort of low carbon lifestyle that is becoming very sexy, and it's a term that is used by a lot of people these days. There's also a lot of different apps that are used to recommend strategies in which you can reduce household energy consumption. So once again, energy consumption is considered, scope 2, right? So a lot of the electricity that we burn basically comes from fossil fuels at the moment. So AI can actually, tell you specifically how to optimize, right, your energy use in your particular household. Smart cities and mobility as well is coming up to the fore. So mobility is quite an interesting one because with the use of AI, you can actually project the increase, right? Like in transportation, right, in a certain city, and basically estimate the amount of carbon that is being released during peak hours. And this actually basically helps inform policymakers on, different strategies that they can adopt to make transportation, I suppose, more low carbon and greener. So I guess in short, I just wanted to end by saying that, there are different applications of AI that can be used, and I think the opportunities are really immense. There is really no shortage in terms of its area of application. We have also seen a lot of this being used in precision agriculture. So remember earlier on, I was saying that droughts and floods are basically affecting crop use. In this day and age, you can actually very precisely estimate the amount of fertilizer and the precise amount of water that is needed in order to ensure that your crops are actually growing at its most optimum level. So these are parameters that, we can basically modify and actually take control of, right, with the power of AI. Once again, opportunities are limitless, and I really look forward to hearing from you, like in our conversations and chats later. So with that, I'll pass the time back to Ravi.
Thanks, Dr. Reynard, for this insightful presentation. I do believe that environment, it's a global challenge, and I think that you demonstrate some solution with artificial intelligence that we can really, who can contribute to reduce this global challenge. Now, let me introduce to our second guest speaker, Amy Ramlis. She's the co-founder and director of digital innovation and growth at Tyne Solutions, an award-winning tech consultancy specializing in bridging gaps in organizations. Amy is an active advocate of gender equality as well as cultural and natural heritage conservation. Amy is also the co-chair of the US ASEAN Women's Leadership Academy Alumni Network and also co-founded the Southeast Asia Women Organization. The objective is to educate, connect, and empower women across ASEAN to solve regional and global challenges. Amy, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ravindra, and thank you, Dr. Reynard, for a wonderful contextualization of the urgency of using innovative solutions to really address global challenges. So I think I wanted to add to the conversation at hand by giving a bit of a taste of what is happening in Brunei with the AI landscape here, but really the applications of AI, potential applications, as well as the real concerns that come with the application of AI if it's not done responsibly. So first of all, in Brunei, I don't know how many of you know about Brunei or have been to Brunei, but we're a very small country. And like many other countries across Southeast Asia, we are still in the process of digitalization, still in the process of building up the infrastructure necessary to capitalize on a lot of the new technologies that are appearing with IR 4.0 and 5.0. And so one of the key priorities that's been laid out in the recently released Digital Master Plan 2025 by the Brunei government is really building up the infrastructure necessary to enable a lot of these innovative solutions and technologies to prosper and be used by the private sector in the country. And so some of the first steps into doing that really is about data and data collection. And I think this is something that I'm sure others will also find that resonates with them in the countries across Southeast Asia, the dearth of data that is necessary for a lot of not just a host of AI technologies to be able to develop and work really well, but really to make it representative of the communities it's trying to solve is really, really difficult challenge to solve, especially when you have concentration of data from urban environments and communities being overrepresented in the data sets that are being used by technologies using AI. And so some of the things that in Brunei specifically that's being, done to try and develop this area of our limitations in terms of our infrastructure is really encouraging a lot of public-private partnerships in not only harnessing, developing that data, recording the data, but just sharing. The data sharing platforms that are currently being developed by multiple institutions run by governments in Brunei is really still at a very, very early stage. And this is one of the reasons why you don't really see many AI AI-driven companies coming out of Brunei, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So, for example, we work with machine learning predominantly in a lot of our digital security monitoring offerings to a lot of the organizations we work with. But on that note, as we can see that Brunei, along with other countries in Southeast Asia, still have a lot of steps that they need to take really to make sure that a lot of these solutions that are being developed currently are representative and serve the communities that they are actually trying to serve. And I'll give you some examples of where there's opportunity, but also a real necessity to handle that responsibly. So there are three areas of AI application that really is close to my heart. So first of all is really like Dr. Reynard, I think you're a climate reality leader. Same here. And so the applications of using AI to not only, predict the potential of impact of climate crisis on our specific communities and environments, but really how we can harness ways to sequester carbon through current means that we have. That's something that I think Microsoft AI for Earth has a whole range of solutions that they're investing in, and also really trying to build up in terms of the capacity for a lot of larger and middle-sized organizations to contribute towards the solution that we're all aiming for. And I think, like what Dr. Reynolds mentioned, I probably won't belabor the point, the opportunities for us to really amplify I would say capitalize on the data that is there, but also to use that to our advantage and to be strategic in the resources that we apply in fighting climate change. So, for example, not really putting resources in potential solutions that might not actually have the most impact. That's a really big area that I think for those who are interested, I would recommend looking at some of the programs and fundings run by Microsoft AI for Earth. The second area I wanted to mention is really about how can we use AI for social good? And here specifically, I've been working on issues of gender representation, gender equality, and specifically violence against women and girls. And so these are, although there's a lot out there talking about how AI is being applied to climate science, to I think a lot of criminal investigations. There's actually a lot of applications of AI, especially with deep learning for finding, I guess, lost persons or, I guess, abuse online. There isn't really much still out there that's specifically dealing with, for example, representation of women in media, violence against women and girls. And so some examples of how larger institutions are really trying to capitalize on this technology to solve this social issue can be seen in the work of the World Design Organization and UN Women. So I'm actually working with them as a volunteer designer to come up with solutions in applying AI and other innovative solutions to tackling issues like media representation of women and how that can contribute towards violence against women and girls. And specifically how AI, especially in terms of the algorithms used for dictating what you see on content sharing platforms, but also in terms of how do we monitor what constitutes misrepresentation of women and girls in the media. So that's really, really interesting. There's a lot out there that's currently being done, but I think in terms of that specific area, it's still a growing theme, which I'm looking forward to contributing to. Last but not least, there's also digital security. And so we work with a lot of NGOs in the region across Asia Pacific. And there's been a lot of concern as a lot of these organizations digitalize, there's threats or security threats from political institutions and actors who might not agree with the work that they're doing. And so a lot of what we do is really ensuring that the infrastructure they have in place to enable them to work remains safe and secure, because they are dealing with, for example, vulnerable people and really activists in vulnerable situations. And yet the work they're doing is really paramount to areas of human rights, environmental rights, social rights within the region. And so being able to apply machine learning to analyze the wealth of security logs that we have to handle has been really paramount in ensuring that these organizations still remain effective and secure. And at the end of the day, that's utilizing some AI technologies to make sure that we empower the people who are doing good to be able to do good. But on that note, before I guess I wrap up, I really want to highlight the genuine concerns that come with irresponsible, or at least use of AI technologies without real thought and I guess attention to the potential for ingrained bias. And so, especially when you're dealing with minority communities, when you're applying, for example, machine learning technologies that were built in the West to Southeast Asia as a region, it's really important for us to be aware of the potential implications of not using, I guess, ethical considerations when it comes to developing all these solutions, whether it is for good or bad. And so I'll give you an example. If we're trying to address climate issues or social issues in a specific country without really ensuring the data set that you're using is representative of the diversity of the community that you're trying to serve, then it can very well negatively affect some parts of your society. And so when we talk about using AI or any technology for good, representation is something that should be at the forefront and at the start of every single discussion and really strategizing of implementation of these technologies. You have to make sure that the focus is still on the communities that you're trying to serve, especially when tech for good is what is driving you as an organization and as an individual. So I think I'll stop right there and pass the mic back. And I'm looking forward to a more in-depth conversation when we have Q&A later. But I hope that gives you a bit of a taste of not only, I guess, the stage Brunei is at right now, but the important considerations we all should have when we're talking about applying tech for good, and specifically when we discuss AI's applications for some of the issues, not just regionally, but also globally. So thank you. There you go, Rob.
Thanks, Amy, for sharing your overview of AI landscape in Brunei, but also the implication for gender equality and climate crisis. After Brunei, we will fly to Cambodia with our last speaker, Mr. Siriwat Chem, Director of the Center for Inclusive Digital Economy at Asian Vision Institute, one of the leading think tanks in Southeast Asia. In addition, he is also a digital business consultant at Phnom Penh Commercial Bank and also a visiting professor at Kirium Institute of Technology. He is a member of the Global Shapers Committee, Phnom Penh Hub, an initiative of the World Economic Forum. Siriwat, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me, Ravindra, and the ASEAN Network. So it's a great pleasure to be part of the panel today, along with Amy and Dr. Renard. So just before I begin, I'd like to thank all the AI and digital leaders in Cambodia that I reached out to before today's webinar, because unfortunately there isn't so much, current data and information on AI in Cambodia. I'm sure that goes the same with some other countries in the region because it is new after all. So I'll try my best to give an accurate representation of the local overview of the Cambodia AI industry. So the in ASEAN, one of the most dynamic economic regions in the world, Cambodia's GDP growth has been 7% increase over the past 20 years annually. So, pre-COVID, this was the situation. But still so, it's a very young population with around 17 million people in total. The median age is around 25.6. 2/3 of the population is under the age of 30 years old. And all of these factors combined with, very high smartphone penetration rate, internet usage, mobile data, all attributes towards high digital adoption rates. And so if you were to be in Cambodia, you'd experience it yourself that, through the many, delivery apps or, financial mobile services and everything, payments, deliveries, e-commerce goes very smoothly and it catches at a very, very high rate. And so moving forward, I'd just like to share a video. So basically 3 years ago in 2018, I organized one of the first AI specialized forums here in Cambodia. So that was along with the Cambodia Development Resource Institute and also the Institute of Technology of Cambodia. So I'll be sharing this video shortly.
Overview of 1,000 years of how human beings, with our mind, we move from believing in something higher to use reason. And reason is the foundation of AI. This is an example from the application that we have developed. This called SCARA bot is that we use in factory for moving parts, sorting, drilling, or metal cutting. We basically build custom software, including AI blockchain, and we also build our own startups. We want to make sure that people who lead these try to know what they're talking about. That's the first step. And the second step is to educate people. I always believe that one brain, one type of brain, one type of training cannot solve complex problem of the world. As robot will grow, robot will take over part of the world, part of the job, but it won't take part of our consciousness.
Important to think about, what happened in the previous industrial revolutions. How will history repeat itself? How will the present be different? How will the future be different? And finally, stay human. Thank you. Okay, so thank you everyone for staying tuned for the video. So just to elaborate a little bit about the findings of the forum. So regarding the forum, we gathered together a very small group of specialized, AI experts, both, scholars and entrepreneurs. And we asked them two main questions. The first question was about how will it affect the workforce? Whether jobs will be replaced or created, and what kind of jobs are they going to be? And the second question, was with regards to retaining AI talent in Cambodia. So most of the responses from our participants, were that it's very early stage, and that what we're doing is quite new. So everything is really moving from the first step. And just to move forward, so this was in 2018. So now, 2-3 years later, where are we currently with our AI landscape? So in terms of the AI industry, there are a few, let's say, startups or companies that are focusing on AI. One of them is Slash. So Slash is a specifically AI-focused startup. They develop, different kinds of applications and platforms, ranging from chatbots to their own kinds of machine learning algorithms. One of their popular or I guess well-known projects was with Click, which is a fintech startup. They worked on an eKYC solution, so for know your customer, and they used kind of a let's say a facial recognition process. So we all know that eKYC is a very important process moving forward. Another interesting initiative here in Cambodia is from Kumpi, so it's a local company that has built and created their own low-cost laptop, / computer here in Cambodia. So this is really let's say positive in terms of providing the next generation with the necessary tools and equipment going into the digital age. Moving forward, in terms of in the corporate world, in the financial sector, banks such as PPC Bank is one of the leading digital banks in Cambodia, where they have their own in-house built and developed core banking system, which allows for flexibility, and even to everyday use for the citizens in Cambodia. We use delivery apps such as Nyam24 and Food Panda. This is an example of a Cambodian company versus a foreign company, where the competition kind of drives the increase in digital adoption. Same with car sharing or taxi hailing services such as Grab, with our own local version, which is Pass App. And moving forward, in terms of education, human resource, these are very crucial in the IT field. Recently, there's been a new startup. It's called Jobify. They are a job matching platform which specializes in the IT field. So these are just a few examples of, let's say, companies and their AI initiatives in local industry. With regards to education and research, so the forum did point out that there were some I guess challenges or skill gaps in Cambodia due to its young population and having quite a late start, in terms of anything related to digital IT. But since then, there have been many new advancements. So one of them is the National Institute of Post Telecom and ICT, NIPTIC, which has recently changed to the Cambodia Academy of Digital Technology, one of the main institutes that teach, software engineering, computer science, network, telecom, and other majors. Another one is the Kurirome Institute of Technology, one of the universities with a top, software engineering major in Cambodia. And finally, there's the Cambodia University of Technology and Science, CAMTech. So that's a newly established university, which will be focusing on more, well-rounded and holistic education and curriculum for students, because we can't forget that, in the IT field and specifically in AI moving into the future, the incorporation of humanities and social science is just as important as the technical side itself, because we can't forget that in artificial intelligence, in AI, the goal is really to replicate human intelligence. And so, without having strong moral and ethical values ingrained, this kind of concept might cause some sort of bias, which will not be able to, bring about positive impact in society. And aside from, let's say, a traditional education or formal education, there's also going to be a new museum of modern technology that's going to be established, which will, feature and exhibit local technology-related or digital-related or AI-related startups in Cambodia. Aside from those, there are also several, training centers which are focused on IT, such as the Korea Software HRD Center, the IT Academy STEP, DIU, which focuses on training skilled data scientists. And also another initiative under my institute and center is the Young Digital Leaders Program. So basically what this is that we select IT professionals, young IT professionals under the age of 25 from different organizations and companies. And basically we train them not in hard skills, not in technical skills, but in soft skills. Again, I just want to emphasize that, the value of soft skills in the IT field is so important, in terms of the 4 C's of the 21st century, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. Because in all, AI projects, there are always going to be 3 components. You have your technical experts, who are your developers or programmers. You have your subject matter experts, your SMEs, so in the particular field that you're trying to create your AI project in, whether it's in, environment or climate change or finance. And then finally, you have your, AI project manager. So somebody who can kind of communicate between both sides of, the developers, as also with the subject matter experts. And finally, to show more advancement and progress in the last few years in Cambodia, since then, the new Ministry of Industry, Science, Technology and Innovation has been established. So this is, very positive news in terms of policy in Cambodia. Secondly, as Amy mentioned before, with all advancements in digital technology and moving on to AI in the future, digital security or cybersecurity is extremely important. And so currently in Cambodia, although there already exists, a cybercrime law, currently the Ministry of Posts and Telecom is, managing the development of the drafting of the law of cybersecurity in Cambodia. And finally, another interesting platform is CamDX, or Cambodia Data Exchange. It's an online exchange platform which is going to incorporate, different ministries, also crossing between the public and private sector to kind of, create more efficient and effective processes, moving towards a digital economy, digital society, and so on. So in conclusion, in terms of Cambodia's AI landscape or overview, it's still very early stage, but it's very positive. It's an extremely promising and rapidly growing young population. And we look forward to any sort of partnership or cooperation, with different, countries or any sort of foreign talents that decide to come to Cambodia and start something new. Thank you.
Thanks, Thierry, for sharing your vision and overview about the AI landscape in Southeast Asia, focused in Cambodia. And also, of course, that meaningful and significant AI forum, which was in 2018. And I do believe, as you said, that the government has put a lot of efforts on a different side, both on entrepreneurial, but also with the private sector, which try to achieve a sustainable vision for 2025 for Cambodia digital strategy. So now we will go and move forward with the Q&A session. So I will kick off first with before taking some questions from the participants. with a question to you. And my first question is, what for you the key priorities to ensure that the adoption of emerging technologies such as AI in the digital, biological, and physical domains unlock opportunities for growth while serving society as a whole? Who want to start? And at the same time, I'm also asking the same question to the participant. Who want to go first?
I'd be happy to have a quick jab at this. I think the key priority is a combination of trust and governance and policy, because the technology will sort itself out. The technology is, to be honest, already there, but really it's a combination of trust and government policy, simply because, as I mentioned earlier, for you to have adoption, representation of the diversity of communities within the region, you need to have everyone involved. And if you have people who trust, I guess, the system that is collecting and managing their data, and yet the government policy and infrastructure isn't there to actually connect and compile that information and serve them, then there's really no point. And so it's really, and on the flip side, if you don't have good governance and policy, you won't get trust. And so I think the onus is really on our institutions to make sure that there are protections in place to be able to manage this really rapid growth and development that we're seeing now in a way that's responsible and ethical, but also to make sure that there are real policies to really ensure that everyone is impacted and also included in whatever policies that they're designing. So I think from my side, that's really the main point.
Thanks, Amy. Dr. Ronald? Oh, I think maybe you need to unmute yourself, or we cannot hear you. We cannot hear you. Maybe we go first to Siri Watt, and maybe Dr. Ronald try to solve the issue.
Sure. Yeah, I can join. Yeah. So I do agree with Amy that it's mostly to do with trust and governance and policy, especially in terms of raising awareness, and education to the public. Because these technologies are already available out there. It doesn't matter really which country you're in, because they're already online, and we use it on a daily basis, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or Netflix. Of course, these are very general examples, but then when it comes to the local development of AI usage, that's when governance and policy comes into play. It is there to protect consumers, to protect citizens. And then the second layer is, of course, on the individual level, in terms of trust. So related to people and data, when we use applications and platforms that, use AI, although they use it, most of the time we don't really know how it's being used, what kind of data is being used, not only from the consumer side, but even from the supplier side. It's a well-known concept that when you develop a sort of algorithm, or you're feeding certain types of data sets to train the algorithm, we only know what goes in and what comes out, but not really what is happening in the middle. And so that's why trust is a huge issue. So I think it really all goes back to, as I said, as much as we think artificial intelligence is, robots or anything that is not human, it's actually much more human than we think. It's just a reflection of the way that we think, the way that we perceive the world in terms of, bias, whether it's cultural or gender or many other aspects. Thank you.
Thanks, Siriwat. Maybe Dr. Ronald, you can perhaps try again? That's a technological issue. We cannot hear you, sadly.
Can I just maybe, while we're waiting for Dr. Renard, can I just add one more point?
Of course, Amy, please.
I think another factor that we really need to consider is how COVID has impacted all of this. And this is really critical. The countries that would have never had the level of rapid adoption that we've seen in the past year. We've seen, I think, specifically in Brunei, 5 years of development happening in a single year. The speed at which people were willing to engage with these nationwide data management platforms that deal with your health, your personal information, and really allowing bodies that we have absolutely no control, oversight, or transparency over to really manage this information for the good of our health has really shifted our perception of what people are willing to do and engage with. And so it's an opportunity, but also a real concern. So I think this is something that we can see across not just Southeast Asia, which I think Asia is really further ahead, I guess, because there's a lot of hesitance in a lot of Western countries. But the importance of ensuring there's trust and policy in place is really being tested right now. And we can see that in every country across Asia Pacific.
Thanks, Amy, for adding this point. I think that just to reply, and thanks for all the participants for answering our poll. So what is the key priority to ensure AI credibility and adoption? So for 58%, trust is the major and the dominant answer. And then come for 42% governance and policy. And only 3% is the technology behind who prevails. So I think that trust, and I think that Siri, what you mentioned, this point is a key message. So perhaps we can take a last questions before we start our one-to-one networking algorithm session. So maybe Siri, what the question perhaps for you is what policies and partnership are needed to optimize transparency and privacy?
Yeah, this is a great question because transparency and privacy, it brings about a very ethical issue. And the problem with this is that the perception of these issues are different in different parts of the world due to our different cultures, the different way that we think. And this is why international governance of such technologies is such a complex situation. So I think that in terms of policies, if it comes at the international level in terms of really aiming to protect and to regulate the use of technologies in the world, it comes down to first partnerships to understand both sides, or in the case of multilateralism, understanding all sides, that it's not going to be the same template used across all different countries, and then eventually as a governance of the whole the whole world, really, when it comes to that. So I think it really comes down to the same issue of governance. It doesn't have to be related to technology, but it's always been an issue. And now with entering into the more complex situation that revolves around connected to the internet or in the cyberspace, it really just becomes more complex. So I think, simply put, we should think of it in a less technical way and go back and make it into a more, let's say, simple human interaction of agreement on different arguments and disagreements as a whole.
Thank you, Siwat. Okay, I think that Dr. Renard, we can perhaps try you last time. Dr. Renard? Hello? No, I think that that's a technological issue. That's fine, no problem at all. And perhaps, Amy, you want to before we start, a last note about this question?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. So the question was, what policies and partnerships are needed to optimize transparency and privacy?
I think I definitely believe that it still boils down to the understanding of our rights in each of the countries that we're dealing with, and specifically on your rights over your own data, which is something that is, to be honest, isn't very well, or at least not comprehensively covered in a lot of Southeast Asian countries. So, for example, we don't have anything similar to what they have in the EU with GDPR, which I think is really necessary once, especially as we move towards IR 4.0, 5.0, where literally we're now testing out 5G in the country. The immense amount of data that needs to be processed and handled, and yet there is no real legal or policy discussion that can even cover that. I mean, to be honest, even right now with a lot of Southeast Asian countries, there aren't even clear laws on what should or shouldn't be posted on platforms like Facebook. And I think a lot of that, there's a gray area between freedom of speech and also issues surrounding, I think, well, I mean, they say freedom of speech laws in a lot of countries, that actually it goes against what they're trying to say. But I guess the most important thing really is understanding the, again, I agree, the human side of how this technology is going to be applied. I actually have a humanities background. And so it's, I definitely see how critical it is to have that perspective, especially when it comes to policymaking around technology, because at the end of the day, as Sarah mentioned, it's AI is designed, it's not robots that design it, we're humans that control it and design it, and it replicates and mimics us. And so we need to have the partnerships and policies in place between governments, industry leaders, but really also with CSOs in every country to make sure that the policies that you do design to enable and empower these technologies also reflect the current situations of the most vulnerable and underrepresented in each country.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks. I think sadly we don't have any more time for the question, but we see some question from the participant, but we will reply you by private message. So now we will start our 3 minutes and 3 rounds of digital networking session. The questions behind that is, does artificial intelligence better than human intelligence? Please feel free to interact behind that question. Otherwise, you can mingle and network each other, and we'll see each other in 9 minutes. Have a nice networking party.